Okay, let's get right into it. The whole controversy around the Jeffrey Epstein files really boils down to one thing: a promise of complete transparency from the government and what people feel they actually got. And this is about so much more than just a stack of documents. It's really about a crisis of trust.
Unredacted. That was the word. The one single word promised to Congress and, by extension, to the American public. The idea was, you're going to see everything. No black bars, no hidden names, the full story. And that promise? Well, it set a really high bar for what was expected.
You know, for years, the public has had one big question hanging over the Epstein case. Who else was involved? We're talking about a case with federal sex trafficking charges, powerful people, a massive public demand for answers. So when the government promised transparency, the expectation for the full, unvarnished truth was just enormous. So how do we get here? Well, first, you have the federal charges. Then Epstein dies before his trial, which just leaves this huge vacuum of unanswered questions. To fix that, transparency legislation gets passed. And then finally, Congress gets the invitation to come review these supposedly unredacted files. You can see how each step just raised the stakes and built up this expectation of total disclosure.
And this brings us to the moment of truth, the day lawmakers actually went to the Department of Justice to finally see these documents for themselves. They walked into that room expecting one thing, but what they say they found was something else entirely.
70 to 80%. That's the number that just blew this whole thing wide open. According to the congressmen who were in that room, after spending a couple of hours with the files, they came out saying a staggering amount of the material was still blacked out. We're talking paragraphs, names, huge sections, just gone. And this quote really says it all, doesn't it? It perfectly captures that massive gap between the promise of unredacted and the reality they described, where most of the information was, in their words, still completely hidden. And here's where it gets even more complicated. An allegation surfaced that the files the DOJ showed to Congress had already been scrubbed by the FBI months before. The DOJ's response was reportedly that they just uploaded what the FBI gave them. If that's true, it raises a huge question. Who's making these calls before the oversight process even begins? Now, it's really important to take a step back and look at this from all sides. It's not as simple as saying, every black bar is a cover-up. In the legal world, there are often legitimate, even required, reasons for reductions. So on one hand, you have the official rationale. Things like protecting the privacy of victims, making sure you don't compromise ongoing investigations, and keeping grand jury proceedings secret. These are serious, valid legal principles. But on the other hand, you have the public's concern, the perception that the record was scrubbed, that the powerful are being shielded, and this growing fear that we have a two-tier system of justice.
So, to be fair and keep this all in perspective, there are a few ground rules we have to remember. First, just because a name appears in a file doesn't automatically mean guilt. Second, an accusation is just that, an accusation. It should not be treated as a conviction. And finally, as we just talked about, redactions themselves can serve very legitimate and necessary purposes. These aren't excuses, they're foundational principles of our justice system.
And that's why this whole controversy has struck such a nerve. It taps into a much bigger, much deeper fear that a lot of people have. The idea that justice in America isn't applied equally to everyone. It's brought in the conversation from these specific files to the integrity of the entire system. This right here is the core fear that this whole situation has ignited. The belief that how much money and influence you have can fundamentally change the kind of justice you receive. And that is the absolute crux of the issue. See, the perception of unfairness can be just as damaging as actual unfairness. The moment people stop believing the rules apply to everyone equally, faith in the very institutions that are supposed to uphold those rules, it just starts to crumble. So when you boil it all down, what are the real stakes here? This is no longer about one set of documents or a single case. It's about institutional credibility. It's about whether the public can still trust the process at all. You can almost watch it happen in slow motion. Step 1, a promise of full transparency is made. Step 2, that promise appears to be broken. Step 3, silence and confusing messages follow. And the result? Step 4, public suspicion and distrust just grows and grows. It's a textbook pattern for how to lose public confidence. This is such a critical point. If there are good legal reasons for redactions, the answer isn't to be silent about it. It's to explain it. The lack of clear, direct communication is what pours fuel on the fire of suspicion. Promising unredacted and then delivering a file that's mostly blacked out, that's the heart of the problem. And that leads us right here. You see, the simple act of releasing a document isn't real transparency. Not if the public has lost faith in the honesty of the process behind it. If there's no trust, the gesture is empty. It's just going through the motions.
So after all the promises, all the delays, and all the controversy, we're left with this one fundamental question. Are we really seeing the full truth?
And that question immediately leads to an even bigger one that gets to the very soul of our justice system. Is justice blind? Or can power and influence actually shift the scales? In the end, that's the real conversation here. This was never just about what's in a few files. It's about whether Americans can still believe that there is one system of justice for everyone. And that's a question that's going to stick around long after these specific documents have been forgotten.